So as you can tell, I'm definitely not Quicksilver. Guys, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I was in line for 5 hours to see this movie. So let's go ahead and get this review underway, shall we? Hey everyone, Dibby here with my movie review of a little independent film called Avengers: Age of Ultron. Yes, this is one of the biggest movies of the year that practically needs no introduction. No matter what trailer was released, or clip, or image, or poster, or anything, we were bound to see this movie. So let's go ahead and talk about it, shall we? And in Avengers: Age of Ultron, after the events of the last Avengers movie, Tony Stark, as he puts it, wants to put a suit of armor around the world, and in doing so he creates an artificial intelligence named Ultron. However, because, as we've come to expect from various science fiction movies and TV shows, the artificial intelligence becomes self-aware, and when it does, Ultron goes on a rampage to destroy Earth and extinguish all life, to start over and evolve from that point on, and it is up to the Avengers to be called upon once again to eliminate this global threat. Now, being that this is one of the biggest tentpole movies of the year, I feel like it is also one of those movies like The Dark Knight Rises where if you speak ill will of the movie, you might just get crucified. Alright, so I'm gonna take a different approach. After finally witnessing the movie, I feel like I need to soften the blow. I know I'm scaring some of you guys already, but I feel like it'll do me better. It'll definitely do me better to, like I said, soften the blow by starting off with what I didn't like about the movie and lumping all of those negative remarks at the beginning of this review, and then finishing things off with what I loved about the movie. Sounds good? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So one of the things that was known about this movie was that Joss Whedon made it clear that this is going to be his last film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After this, he is done. And he has come forward in saying that these movies could get a little exhausting to make. And I feel like that's shown throughout the movie. There were moments where I can definitely get a feel for Whedon's fatigue in making the movie and making it as big as it needed to be, being that it's an Avengers sequel. And one of those things that I actually knew was going to happen going into the movie, like even from that first trailer, I thought to myself, there's one thing that this second movie might not be able to replicate from the first movie, and that is the magic of witnessing the Avengers come together for the first time. And I knew that wasn't going to happen in Avengers: Age of Ultron, and sure enough it doesn't. I mean, it's still awesome to see these characters together and kick ass, but nothing takes away from the wonder of seeing them together for the first time on the big screen, like you did, like you witnessed in 2012 when the first Avengers movie was released. I mean, you never forget your first. But there were various moments throughout the movie where it felt like a sequel. I mean, a really well-made sequel, but a sequel nonetheless. It never felt like that next big step in the Avengers franchise. It didn't feel like a Dark Knight or an Empire Strikes Back. And there were times where it felt like it was going to go in that direction, but then by the end of the movie, I felt about it like I did with Star Trek Into Darkness, where I was like, okay, good sequel, but it felt more like it was simply just on par with the first one, rather than daring to be much more bold and daring, so to speak, than the first one did. And after watching a movie like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where something really big happened in that movie that changed things dramatically for not just that movie but the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's slightly underwhelming that going into a movie like Avengers: Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, doesn't have that. You know, there's no big like dun 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 moment. It still retains a fun factor. I still had fun with the movie. And to be honest, I'd rather take there not being any big plot twist than to have Whedon shove in a plot twist just for the sake of there being a twist, like Shyamalan would do with his later movies. And there were a couple of elements I felt were just a tad bit rushed, and that's saying quite an awful lot, because not only is this movie written by Joss Whedon, but it's almost 2.5 hours long, and it's rather tragic when a movie that's nearly 2.5 hours or almost 3 hours long, and yet there's certain elements about the movie that still feel rushed. I mean, you wonder to yourself, how does that happen? But unfortunately, at least for me, it happened just a little bit in this movie. And one of those would actually be Ultron himself. I felt like the persona and the way James Spader played him was excellent. Alright, he was a terrific villain, and James Spader nailed the role. He nailed the persona. There were certain lines of dialogue that I heard, and I'm like, only James Spader can get away with a line like that being delivered through the character of Ultron. but I felt like the way he's introduced into the story felt just a little rushed, because one of the things about artificial intelligence that has always appealed to me as being quite scary is that light bulb moment where the artificial intelligence, no matter which movie or book, becomes self-aware about what's going on around them. Like, that he figures out, oh, these humans are primitive, I must extinguish them all. And that's the stance that he has, but we never saw him go to that stance. We never saw that transformation. I mean, he literally gets flipped on, and the first thing that comes to his mind is like, nope, I gotta eliminate the first person that's gonna oppose me. And I wish we could have had that progression, even if it's just for a few scenes and doesn't last all that long. I wish we could have had a little bit of progression with his character at the very beginning. But like I said, after we get that formal introduction to Ultron in this form, he is amazing, and he's one of the best villains that has been created for the MCU. Not necessarily the best, and you know, nothing really tops Loki, at least for me so far, because I haven't watched Daredevil. I've heard great things about the Kingpin in that show, but for me, Ultron is definitely right up there with one of the better villains that Marvel has been churning out lately. And the other element would have to be the romance between Black Widow and Hulk. The idea itself, perfectly fine. I liked it. I saw that in those couple of trailers where it looked like they were going for a romance angle between the two of them, but I did not mind. I was like, yeah, I can definitely see it between these two, and they had some really good chemistry early on in the movie. But there's a scene later on towards the latter half of the movie that I felt was a tad, just a little bit melodramatic. It reminded me a little bit of a soap opera, and I felt like that was a little bit of a jump from what they were having earlier in the movie, which was simply just flirting between the two of them. I mean, they were legitimately just flirting with one another. And then in this one scene towards the end of the movie, they were thinking about making certain decisions that even married couples are having trouble with these days. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I guess that we have finally reached critical mass when it comes to end credit scenes. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil anything, but let's just say that I feel like they were shoving a few too many end credit scenes with movies like Captain America: The Winter Soldier or the first Avengers movie to the point where we were having two end credit scenes. One in the middle after the flashier end credits and right before we get the scrolling credits, and then the second one at the very, very end. Not only do we not get a second end credit scene at the very end, so once you see the first one, go ahead and get up and leave. There's nothing at the end, and I know this because I stayed until the very end, even after Whedon himself tweeted out or said out in an interview somewhere saying that, hey, there's nothing at the end, so don't bother waiting. I thought it was maybe a little bit of a test, a loyalty test from Whedon, but no, dude was telling the truth. There's nothing at the end there, so don't bother wasting your time. And the one end credit scene that we do get early on after, like I said, the very Mortal Kombat X type end credits, it's a little bit underwhelming because it's literally a Vine video. Okay, well, not literally. I mean, it's not like somebody's recording themselves on Vine, but it can fit in the running time of a Vine video, which is only 6 seconds. It's like 5 seconds long. All right, it's like a really nice hard candy or a soft chew candy that tastes great, but it dissolves in your mouth almost instantaneously. Where you look at it, it's awesome, but it's over before you even get to finish the phrase, that was awesome. Alright, so, you're done typing that paragraph in the comment section about how much you hate me? Well, go ahead and start hitting delete, because that was practically it for my qualms that I had with this movie, because now starts the good stuff, the stuff that I really did enjoy about the movie. First of all, Joss Whedon still knows how to handle these characters respectively, treating them in the way that they should be treated. For one, the action sequences in this movie are terrific. In fact, I feel like some of them actually top off some of the scenes that we had in the first Avengers movie. Right now, the one that sticks out for me the most as the standout would be the Hulk versus the Hulkbuster fight scene. That's the one that's staying in my mind the most and replaying the most. But besides that, what I also love is that all the other action sequences, not only are they well choreographed, well made, with terrific special effects, but also there's moments where Whedon knows what to show and what to put in there. Because there's various moments where I wish a certain character would do something with their powers, or a certain character would intervene and help this guy out, and right when I was thinking that, Whedon said, oh, you were thinking that? Let me go ahead and throw it in there, and he would do it, and I'm like, yes! It's fan service moments like that I can definitely appreciate. And what he was also able to do is handle some of the new and returning characters better than he did in the first movie. First of all, an awful lot of people were complaining about Hawkeye and how he was hardly in the first one, and when he was in the first one, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, he's actually a bad guy for the majority of that movie under the mind control of Loki. It isn't until the very end where he actually becomes a full-on Avenger. Here, Whedon manages to fix that by giving him way more screen time. He gets more lines of dialogue, he becomes much more involved in the action, he has some really cool moments, and besides that, he has this little segment in the movie where it's almost like he becomes the main character. There's even a scene that has certain characters in that scene treating him like he's the main character, and I'm like, okay, this is actually rather cool. The spotlight is actually on him rather than the flashier guys like Captain America, Iron Man. I mean, sure enough, we're going to cut back to them eventually, but it's cool that Renner, as well as Hawkeye, has their little moment in the limelight for this movie. And then you also got the twins, or the enhanced, because, you know, 20th Century Fox, played here by Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen, which is kind of weird because they played husband and wife in Godzilla. But they played Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, respectively. And even though they don't get called that in this movie, and probably because of 20th Century Fox and their copyright issues, because they can't use those terms if they're sharing the characters with Marvel, but still, Whedon, as well as these actors, were able to make the characters feel like a welcome addition to the group. No matter on what side they were on throughout the movie, they were still welcome additions. It was cool to see them execute their powers. They had a very substantial amount of screen time, you know, just the right amount to where they didn't feel underused, but they didn't look like they were, you know, overshadowing the rest of the characters that needed a little bit of their time, especially Hawkeye. And they were still cool to see in this movie. One thing happens with them, however, that, again, I'm not going to spoil, but I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I'm trying to look at it and go, okay, you know, I understand it, but at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I need to let some more time marinate that. But for the time being, I will go ahead and save that for my spoiler talk video. And this isn't that big of a spoiler because you saw a little bit of him in one of the trailers, and he had his own character poster recently released getting a really good look at him. But Vision is in the movie, and he's a really cool character. He was really well played by Paul Bettany. They were able to work him into the story in an organic way, and they gave him the substantial amount of screen time that he deserved. The only two of the Avengers that take a seat back, because I knew going into this movie that since it's not the first one, because in the first one I was expecting all the characters to be balanced, because it's the first time them coming together, so I'm expecting each character to have their moment to where they can have chemistry with the other. Here, I was expecting one, maybe two characters to take, like I said, a seat back and not have that much going for them, because you got plenty more characters to get introduced and others to make up to, like Hawkeye. So, in this movie, Thor and Captain America are probably the ones that take the shorter end of the stick, because aside from having cool action moments, nothing really happens with their characters in terms of development or any sort of new characteristics. I mean, even Tony Stark gets a little bit more of an arc in this movie, because being that he's the one who creates Ultron, there has to be a reasoning behind that, and they gave him a good little backstory and a good emotional beat that makes him feel like he should be responsible for this program. He feels responsible for making sure nothing else happens in the world like it did in the first Avengers movie, so therefore creating the Ultron program. And because of that, Thor and Captain America do take a seat back, because not much happens with them except for the action set pieces that they partake in. But still, Whedon was able to still bring back that sense of chemistry with each of the characters, give them some really good, humorous, and heartfelt lines of dialogue, and still feel like the team has come together. Just like I said, the only downside is that magic of them coming together for the very first time from the first movie, not entirely there. And even though I said that no big plot twist happens like it did in Captain America the Winter Soldier, there's still plenty of things that happen in this movie that are stringed to, no pun intended, string to other Marvel movies, whether it be Marvel movies from the past or Marvel movies that are going to be happening in Phase 3. Some really substantial stuff happens in this movie that's very much worth talking about in a separate video, because trust me, it has an awful lot to do with some vital plot points that are hinting at other possible Marvel movies, Marvel movies that have been announced, some that might not be announced, but you know, chances are they're going to go in that direction. And there's still some good fan service there for the people who follow this entire timeline up until this point. But there's no denying that Avengers Age of Ultron is a really well-made sequel, but it never really felt like that that event. It felt like Joss Whedon was kind of like guilt-tripped into making this movie, and he said, hey, if I make it, I better make it right and not half-ass it. And he really didn't. But that excitement of seeing these characters for the first time and Whedon handling this material like he did in that first movie is just not there. Alright? I really, really like this movie. There's plenty of great things about this movie. But there are some shortcomings, and sadly that is one of them. So for that, I give Avengers Age of Ultron, get ready for this, a really, really high 8 out of 10. It would have been a 9 if either they developed Ultron just a little bit more there at the beginning, or like I said, found a way to bring back all of the heart from the first movie. Instead, we're dealing with maybe 75% of the heart from the first movie. That magic of seeing these characters together. Because like I said, it's still awesome, but just nothing beats the excitement and the wonder of seeing these characters for the first time in 2012. So let me know what you guys thought of Avengers Age of Ultron if you have seen it, and look forward to a spoiler video from me because like I said, there's still plenty of things to talk about. There's this little segment in the middle of the movie that delves into the psyche of our Avengers, and that was a really cool moment, especially some stuff with Natasha Romanoff that's worth talking about. Like I said, I don't want to spoil too much, plus there's the end credit scene, there's the way things end at the end of the movie, and then some things that start off the movie that are even connected to the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is pretty exciting. But look forward to all of that in my spoiler video. Until then, I'll see you guys later.